Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Andrew Turner, founder and host of the Praxi Pod. So, welcome, Mr. Alasdair Anderson. How are you?
I'm very well, Andrew. Great to see you as always.
And great to see you too. Where are you joining from today?
From Amsterdam, which is my hometown, by way of Glasgow, for everybody listening. I'm sure you can tell from the accent, but I've lived in the Netherlands now for over 5 years.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming on the Praxi Pod. So, the Praxi Pod is a new show, and what we're bringing together is data leaders across the world. So, thanks, Alistair, for joining us today. And I suppose, in my experience over the last few decades, data seems to be more and more kind of a hot topic. It seems to be getting hotter and hotter in the data kitchen. I suppose, to kick things off, I suppose what are you seeing? What's kind of what's keeping you awake at night, if anything, and what you see in the data space. And also, maybe you could do a bit of a quick intro about what you're working on these days. What's happening in Alistair's world.
Okay, happy to. I think you're playing it down a little bit, Andrew, in terms of the data space is getting bigger and bigger. I think it's exploded beyond all recognition in the last 12 months. I think it would be almost beyond obvious to say that the explosion of LLMs and what OpenAI have done has just completely changed opinions, perspectives, society. Actually, people are talking about threats and opportunities that they didn't really think was probably possible this probably even decade. I mean, it's unbelievable what's happened. I don't know if you've seen the latest release of the video technology from OpenAI, but it's truly jaw-dropping. I know that it's on limited release, so that's obviously because it takes more GPUs to run one of those videos than any normal human could afford. It's probably why they're going around trying to raise $7 trillion, was the Wall Street Journal report that I saw. So for me, it's a tremendously exciting time to be in the space that we're all in. I think, with opportunities comes challenges. How are we going to feed information to these platforms? Are we allowed to? I saw that Reddit have just signed a $60 million a year deal to license their content. I'm sure the Wild West that is Reddit didn't think they were going to be feeding AI 10 years ago, and yet they are. Same with, you saw all the Twitter information going behind paywalls. So I think we're at a very exciting time. We're at a very challenging time. And I mean, not many things keep me up at night. Sometimes my fermentation tanks with my beer bubble too much, and that disturbs me. But what I tend to get a bit sleepless with is the excitement of things that we can do as an industry and things that I can do during my working day. So for me, it's just tremendously exciting to be around and be active and working with multiple customers at this time. So, the things that we are actively working on is how can we produce a data supply that meets this demand? How do we make sure that we do the right thing? That can be, a legal discussion, a compliance discussion, but it can also be a customer trust discussion. Do our customers or my customers expect their information to be used for such purposes? At the same time, you have that whole consumer movement that really expects technology to be much simpler. And that really is what artificial intelligence promises to do for data. Me and you are both veterans of the big data times. I still think fundamentally it was a paradigm shift as well. But for me, artificial intelligence is the first major application of big data. Because up until then, we'd spent all that time building big data platforms. And at the end of the day, we produced an SQL report. So now we can actually produce things like Copilot, like OpenAI, and like Sora that just completely change your perception of the world, and that's fantastic.
Yeah, no, it's really, and what I find is it's very difficult to keep up with. It's kind of like every day, every other day, there's some kind of announcement. I mean, like last week or the other week, there was like Nvidia's brought out an OpenAI competitor, and then obviously Sora then say, oh, they're gonna then dominate, GPU chips. They're gonna go into hardware, And then, to your point, this like I think last Monday with Sora, where effectively you could create a game, you could create a video game, I suppose, couldn't you, with one line of one prompt or a
Yeah.
number of prompts. I mean, it's just beyond belief. And then obviously, what's the impact on Hollywood as well? Things like that, and all that kind of media entertainment space. It's just, yeah. I mean, I don't know what's next. To be honest with you, it's kind of like a bit bewildering. But I suppose from a positive point of view, any board of directors out there, any leadership team in any organisation, they've got to be like you can't ignore this stuff now. You've actually got to grab hold of it. And I suppose it raises the piece around the stuff that you do, your business in Protegrity and the stuff we're doing at Praxi around, how do you get that stuff sorted out foundationally? Because otherwise, it's going to be that you're not going to get the right outcomes, you're not going to get the right results. So I don't know if that's what you're seeing, but that's the conversation we're having with various different organisation now is that they are suddenly the boardroom is suddenly realizing that they can't drink all their data. It's not some of it's contaminated, some of it's not in a good place. So I don't know if that's what you're seeing as well into those kind of conversations.
I think the first thing that I would say is common across the boardrooms is this sort of idea of the Kodak moment just get put on steroids. There is a lot of industries that are looking at what's going on as the next essential threat. So, if we don't move forward with this, if we don't have a response, you mentioned the creative industries. I think it's larger than Hollywood. I mean, it's difficult to imagine something like the Adobe product suite not having to adapt for AI inclusion, adoption, and acceleration of their products. It's going to change the way that creative works with those tools. But I think that's the same for the publishing industry. And then you get into the sort of not that those industries are easy, but certainly the harder industries of finance, pharmaceuticals, even oil exploration has been crying out for an application of all the information that they have for quite some time. They've never been able to process it to the volume and with the sort of adaptability that you could get from an AI style solution. So the first thing that we're saying at the board level is very much that. It's, what do we have to do just to keep up? And that's a fearful discussion. It tends to be the first thing that human nature gravitates towards, but then that becomes a discussion about how can we adopt or build products that really give us a leapfrog on our competition or brand new products to market, create new markets. So again, it gets back to that sort of excitement angle. And then I think the last part of the discussion, as you're highlighting, is it comes to the difficult part, which is how do we actually do this? And I think the two challenges people have with feeding these models is access of information and quality of information. On the access side of things, we're actually living, in very interesting times from a geopolitical standpoint. Wars are not good things, but they are extremely disruptive to supply chains, to international relations, and in our world, to the transmission of information over borders. That, coupled with the introduction of, I don't know how many times I've seen the sentences, this is X country's version of GDPR. If they were all the same, that would be great, but they're not. They're all different. There's a lot of data sovereignty. And we've started describing it as data nationalism. People don't want their information to travel over borders. At the same time, we've never really, as an industry and as commercial entities, cleaned up the information that we've had. It's always been let's refine, and then get a report that we can send to our customers, our regulators, shareholders. So those two axes of access and quality certainly strike me as the major hurdles in order to enable a successful AI adoption. And that's, sort of putting to the side the simple solution, the simple challenges of where do I get that kind of computing power, where do I store all of my information, who has access to it, and who can actually build these damn models, because they're really quite tricky in themselves. But the raw material and what has made this revolution possible is data. And therefore, I think that access and quality challenge is really the number one potential blocker, but certainly something that would stop you maximizing the outcomes of your investment. Getting really the highest quality performance from your models, and essentially customer satisfaction as well. We see a number of usages, use cases, and changes where the customer experience is being completely revolutionized by an adaptive solution. Let's just call it that. There's still a lot of rules-based systems out there making a difference, but those rules are driven by an understanding of the information underneath. So really, if you want to make that leap in customer experience, that's really only done with high quality and highly available information, and really real-time information as well. Just having a download of something that's 2 years old, and this was a major contention for ChatGPT, several months ago. Is sorry, I can't answer that question. I'm only trained up to 2020, whatever it was. And you could almost hear the collective frustration across the world. Magnify that by every company, in the Fortune 2000. That's what their dashboards have been looking at for the last 10 years, is historical information. So AI promises to get ahead of that curve and be able to answer future questions in real time. And that's, how do we get there is the main challenge from the boardroom.
And that's interesting. I mean, so I agree with you. I mean, it's not a new phenomenon. What you talked about with the quality of information and the access. But I suppose is it now getting to become like that top right thing, urgent and important? Because it's always been that kind of it's not an easy thing to do, and it's a bit messy, yeah, and it's a lot of effort. And historically, people haven't been recognised or rewarded for doing it, but it's just been taken as matter of fact. About it should be 100% accurate. It should be 100% quality. It should be drinkable. In my water analogy, but are you seeing any organisational changes in the organisation you're talking to, where somebody's actually grabbing the nettle and actually going after it now, or is that still kind of in transition? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I'll borrow a metaphor from a homeland. It's certainly a painting the Forth Road Bridge problem. There is no, and as you well know, I have an operations background from investment banking. So there was a time when my entire working day was trying to match trades against the potential prices and making sure that they settle within the window. So those challenges never stop. I think what the challenge has now become is that there's just no human-based process that can deal with the complexity volume of the information that is requested of this sort of demand side, whether it be analytics, whether it be artificial intelligence, whether it be just regulators looking for a better answer. That we've seen a lot of that in the finance industry, that you would come up with an aggregate number and the regulator would go, well, that looks okay, well, let's move on. Now what they're looking to do is go through the entire quality of your loan portfolio at the loan level. And we're seeing that as a challenge for the financial services industry, for analytics producers that work in there, so your ratings agencies, your financial information providers. So I think we've moved past that point of you can throw people at this problem. So the question then becomes, what do you throw at this problem, and is there a sort of almost like a meta solution where AI is going to fix the AI problem? And I think me and you both believe the answer to that to be yes. But I think some of the organisational changes that would require are very early days. So for me, if you want to enhance the quality of information, if you want to enhance the governance of information, that would not best be done by a standalone, data organization. That has to be embedded into the fabric of your people and your processes. So, I think, and you do see this at more advanced sites, it's almost like a Scrum idea of embedding the specialists within the team, but I would expect to see, maybe not AI coders as such, model builders, but certainly people who can tune parameters. I would expect to be seeing them working with operations teams, whether that be, in the trading world, whether it be in the accountancy world, whether it be in, an oil production facility. I mean, think of the amount of IoT information that's coming off your average oil rig. It's unbelievable. Aviation, the same, all that sensor data. I would expect to see, people who are, let's just say them, AI sympathetic, AI empathetic, being able to switch from a human to a machine process to be able to understand and then tune the process itself. Are we seeing that? We're seeing people thinking about doing it. I think for me, the sort of tipping point will be where that moves out of and we've all had these job titles at one point where we wanted to be named after the hot technology. So it was chief data officer, and then it was chief data and analytics officer. I'm sure there's already some chief AI officers floating about out there. For me, that's sort of the crescendo of the wave. And I think when you get into the actual part of the productivity of the wave, it'll be when those AI capabilities are adopted by lines of business, and they are responsible for the general experience that customers or whoever may be the beneficiaries of that service are affected by.
Yeah, so what you're saying is that kind of the data sets or the data is going to be federated across the organization, and then how do you embed the data workers? But I suppose the question then is about skill set and data literacy and competence. So you're going to work. Is there a skills gap then? I suppose that opens that kind of conversation up. I suppose about how do you upskill your teams as well, and actually how do you find the talent to do that?
With great difficulty, I would imagine. Certainly when I was hiring, it was a global hiring process. I've run large data engineering teams, and at the time we were looking for Spark and Scala specialists, which were like unearthing a dinosaur's tooth in the desert. But so we would be
What these data unicorns? Yeah. Okay.
well, it's certainly better than data dinosaurs, isn't it? Um, I think there's two aspects to this. Is there a skills challenge? Absolutely. Will the skills challenge be inhibitive as it probably was during the big data days? I mean, to run a large Hadoop cluster, for example, was difficult. I mean, really hard. And therefore adoption never really took off the way we expected it to, because it was just too hard. So I think there's an element of skills. I think this is more of an application revolution rather than needing an army of coders to build your models. Sorry. So there will be an aspect of skills and how do you interact with the models, how do you train the parameters, how do you know when you've got too many parameters, when you've got too few, you've got the wrong model, so on and so forth. That will very much be a centralized skill. But I think there's also an aspect of translation of the technology into the business context, which is a very obtuse way of saying the technology has to be relevant to the business people that are using it. So I think the technology has to be softened as well. When you see someone using ChatGPT for the first time, that's an example of the technology being relevant to the person in front of it. And I think we will see a lot of that. We will see bespoke models for bespoke industries. or maybe even sort of the GPTs, the way they've set up the marketplace with OpenAI. We'll see a lot of that where it's specific for a purpose, loaded with a context, understanding the history of the process that it's there to help with, and it's really relevant to the person who's using it. So I think as long as you have either vendor skills or supplier skills or in-house skills that can make those sort of GPTs, I'm sorry, I can't think of a better name. I'm sure somebody's came up with a better name. That will be more important than having the smartest model guy or the smartest algo guy out there.
Yeah, I mean, it raises 2 points, doesn't it? It's about the kind of hybrid skills. It's not just it's business skills and also some level of data skills, analytical skills combined. That's where you kind of sounds like you need to kind of skill up, but then you're distributing that into the business units, into the functions. And I suppose, yeah, what you're kind of touching about there is, I suppose, if with the large language, with ChatGPT, you're having a conversation. It's like having a conversation with a person. I suppose it's having a conversation with your data. Is that the kind of the future, to make these data workers more productive and make them more effective and efficient in their role, because they're becoming critical to that business unit and that function operating more effectively. So it's a really interesting transformation, I think, opportunity. And I'm fascinated in who's going to be. I suppose I'm talking to lots of different people at the moment, and it's interesting to see who's going to be the trailblazers. There's a lot of talk last year about what the concept and the excitement, the hype cycle. I suppose it's it's going to get real at some point. So what we're seeing is that 2024 is more around actually getting stuff delivered, and that crawl, walk, run approach. I don't know if are you seeing what you're seeing for 2024. Any particular insights on the future?
Well, we're certainly seeing more of a real world or a commercial aspect coming into the discussions. And when I say real world, I mean dealing with the limitations. So, I mean, I'll give you let's just call it a theoretical example. But we're seeing that there is a huge level of nervousness about things like mergers and acquisitions. So why is there? So let's take the example of a healthcare provider in Europe. So if a healthcare provider in Europe was suddenly acquired by a non-European entity, and that non-European entity happens to be in a country that's just said, look, all information that we need for our state AI effort will be made available. How comfortable are EU governments going to be, the EU as a whole going to be allowing that information to go across the border and be used to train somebody else's models, when you know that the checks and balances for data usage are not universal, as I said right up the front. It's a version of GDPR, but it isn't GDPR. And if you're in certain countries in the world, the state takes ownership of whatever they want. Actually, that statement holds quite strongly in the United States. I mean, this isn't a global south discussion per se. It is, state organisations will take primacy over information. So you get into these. We're getting into these really very complex discussion, and they're not complex because the matter is complex. Complex because the world is a big place. It's got many countries in it. They've all got different laws. And if you all of a sudden have to think, how do I deal with local sovereignty of global data and still be able to run my business, as well as develop these models, as well as perhaps even monetize my information by selling it to a third party, then that's taking you into the world of, how can I have anonymization in play? How can I have pseudo-anonymization? Can I train my AI models on this data and then export the model without the data? So we are starting to see, to use your analogy, the sort of the middle cycle of development of people grasping with the realities of how to execute this. Lots of people actually, I don't think are as hesitant on the sort of technical and skills side as they are on the practicality side. What's the legal department going to say? What's the regulator going to say? And for a lot of industries, what's the government going to say? And I think rather than skills, it's a point to sort of education gap. We've seen firsthand regulators saying, I'm not happy with that, but being very, very hesitant to say what they would be happy with. So you find yourself in a sort of, Pebble Beach type discussion where you're asked to bring a stone back, and then the guy says, no, it's not that stone, it's another one, go find it. So we're seeing a lot of sort of realpolitik, if you like, discussions about how can we do this. And this is what's driving them to people like ourselves, where we are a platform that enforces privacy controls, and we do that for large companies. So it's that heritage that's allowing us to answer some of those access challenges of the AI age.
Yeah, but I think what you're saying also is that the tech maybe, I'm not saying is the least complex and least hard to sort out, but it's actually, in comparison to the legal ramifications and the sovereignty issue and the government structure, there's definitely a work, there's a work streams around that you're going to have to address as well. It's not just flicking a few switches in your data center, so to speak, and you sort it. It's a multifaceted problem. Yeah, interesting.
No, absolutely. I mean, you can go to your favorite cloud; they're all great. You can buy a bunch of GPU capacity. You can then put your company data into it, and then you can turn around and discuss with the legal department what you've done. and of those three things, I know which one will be the hardest. And a part of that, a lot of that is maturity. You'll have people who will lead the way. The European Cyber Agency actually produced some pretty good guidance on anonymization pseudo-anonymization for third-party data processors. Sorry, Andrew, you cut out there. I just paused. So the European Cyber Agency just produced some pretty good guidance on third-party data providers and the sort of anonymization, pseudo-anonymization techniques that you have to do. Where is information allowed to be transported? Where does it have to be anonymized? Where does it have to be protected? And they're not doing that by accident. They're doing that because they know that people are looking for guide rails. People want to be, natively want to do the right thing, but they also want to build for a sustainable business. It's no point coming out with a great product that becomes illegal, 6 months later. You actually see that with OpenAI as well. The amount of licensing deals they've had to sign on content just to keep the information flow that they almost certainly got for free 2 years ago. So I think we're seeing a lot of, we are seeing a lot of those discussions, and it's how do you implement controls without losing the benefits of automation that AI gives you. So that's really driving people again to sort of this meta solution, as I described it, of deploying automation and intelligence into the AI data supply chain, and making sure that the information can get where it needs to in a safe, respectful, and trustful manner, as much as it's needed.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? It's definitely making life a lot faster. It's that balance about what do you want to be seen as an innovator and a trailblazer, but then also you've got to balance that about making sure you don't go into the ditch, so to speak, by making the wrong move. So it means that actually the business has got to get really engaged. And I suppose to my mind, is it going to be the CEO, CFO, the kind of statutory directors and the kind of the formal structure that should be really getting behind, whether it's chief data officer, chief analytics officer, CIO, they've got to really support them and collaborate with them around that and get the right people around the table. So it's fascinating. It's going to be a fascinating year, I think. Just to wrap up today's session, one of the things that I suppose, if you were giving some takeaways for anybody that's listening to this episode today, and what any thoughts that you would like to share that kind of to summarise some of the discussion we've had, previously?
Well, I think, to quote a far greater thinker than me, it's the best of times and it's the worst of times. So, while, we've talked about all this excitement, all this really cool stuff to do, and, our part to play in it and the customers that we're working with and frankly, the fun that we're having, what we're also seeing is that at the same time, there's still fundamental challenges in our business community. There's a lot of pressure on costs. There's been a lot of results announced recently, and people with a real focus on costs, even with some really fantastic financial results. People are wanting to look after their bottom line. So for me, a takeaway to the folks listening would be, don't lose sight of that. So when you're looking at what is the best potential fit for artificial intelligence and all the data that's needed for it, perhaps look at something on the cost side of things. Perhaps look at an auditory thing. I mean, it's so uncool and so unsexy. I can guarantee that the people responsible for that would love to do something a little bit cool, but it would take a cost out of the business. It would streamline a business process. So I think it's not an open field. I think you see that in our industry as well. The people that are AI focused are booming. The people that are maybe in another space are struggling right now. So make sure that you don't lose sight of the bottom line. Don't be doing technology for the sake of it, and always have a purpose in mind, and make sure that purpose is aligned with your company, your Jesus.
That's cool. Thank you. So yeah, I mean that's I'm sure we'll invite you back on, Alistair, and hopefully we can do it together, live in Amsterdam at some point, drinking beer. But you never know. Never say never. But yeah, thanks for the time today. And that was Alasdair Anderson, who's doing lots of interesting work with an amazing company called Practicality. So thank you for coming on the show today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Andrew. Pleasure to speak with you as always. And yeah, we can do it drinking beer or making beer, your choice.
Okay, can do. That'll be the next podcast episode, making beer. So diversification.
It's a 4-hour process, so we probably need a few topics and a very, very loyal audience.
Yeah, it'd be a long form podcast episode. Yeah, like Joe Rogan style. Yeah. So thank you for Alistair, and that's been Andrew Turner, the host of the Praxi Pod. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.